Hello, it's Stephen Cooley with Stephen Cooley Real Estate. I've got back on my show today Trent Womble, a local attorney in our area, doing a lot of real estate closings. You were on the show in the past. We talked about two big things, title insurance, and also just explaining why in the Carolinas an attorney's involved in real estate closings, which is not the case all over the country. And so that's a great show if you want to go back and watch it. Some great information for our viewers. On today's show, I wanted to have Trent back because there's two big topics I still want to talk about. This one's very important to me in helping over 14,000 people buy a home over 33 years. And it's what happens to the property when one of the owners dies. And we never want to talk about that, but it's a decision that needs to be made before you go to the attorney's office and close. One of those is called Tenancy In Common, and one's called joint tenancy.
That's right. And so I'll start, Stephen, with describing a little bit about what it means to hold title as a tenancy in common. So That's actually the default in South Carolina. So if you prepare a deed and it's to Bob and Sally as the buyers, and no other languages in there, each will inherit, or each will acquire rather, a 1/2 undivided interest in that property.
Yep.
And if one of the title holders passes away, that interest would have to pass through their estate in those circumstances. So compare that to what's called a joint tenancy. That is another form of taking title that requires specific language to be included in the deed in order for that to take place. But that basically means that if one title holder passes away, the other title holder, the surviving title holder, will acquire 100% ownership in that property, and in most cases could sell that property just by filing a death certificate in the county in which the property is located.
And in the past, when a married couple would buy a property and had children, this was kind of a no-brainer. You kind of know who you'd want to own the property. So many times now, in recent years, unmarried people are buying property, buddies are buying property, roommates are buying properties, people are buying properties as second homes with other people. In Tenancy In Common, if one died, it would go through their will, right?
Pass through
their will, and their heirs would become one of the co-owners. The other one, the other person owns it. And so that's a big decision when unmarried, unrelated people are buying property, especially when they buy property. And so that decision's made at closing, and it defaults if you don't talk about it. And that is a big, big, big decision in owning property, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it's a vacation home or investors buying a property that they think they're going to be able to flip really quick and sell it, it's something that's not always thought about. And as you mentioned, Stephen, it can really be a big deal if it's not titled correctly and someone passes away.
Yeah, absolutely. So make that decision, talk about it with the other owners of the property, whether you want to do tenancy in common, joint tenancy. You can Google it. Tons of information out there. Certainly talk to your closing attorney about it, and they can give you more details. And Trent and his group at Johannes Meyer and Sawyer are absolutely amazing. You did a great job closing my property last year, and tons of our clients and customers. The other thing I want to talk about, because it's big now in almost every neighborhood, and that's homeowners association groups, HOAs, HOA fees. You kind of have the extreme when you buy a condo townhome development, all the way down to a country neighborhood that's got a common interest. So I want to talk about what a buyer should do in research with an HOA, and just kind of what kind of power an HOA has.
Sure, you're absolutely right. They're becoming more and more common in the Carolinas. So starting with when the parties go under contract, there is typically an obligation by the seller to disclose whether the property is in an HOA, sometimes multiple HOAs. We've closed plenty of properties that have more than one governing HOA. And then at that point, the obligation's on the buyer to investigate and determine whether there are any covenants and restrictions filed with the county that govern how they are going to be able to use and enjoy their property.
I just want to give some examples. In some of the townhome and condos in the city of Charlotte, they control when you can move in and move out. They give you a couple of hours and a reserved elevator. They can assess you, and if you can't pay that assessment, they can foreclose. There are neighborhoods just in York County where you can't have any logos on your car. You got a certain number of cars. You can't rent the property. You can't Airbnb the property. There's neighborhoods where there's certain colors you can't paint the house. There's neighborhoods there's certain type of dogs you can't have. So if you close and you haven't read, and listen, some of these are 30 and 40 pages.
Right, they can be quite lengthy and
yeah, and the burden
involved.
falls on the buyer. And just because there's not a pool or clubhouse, just because these neighborhoods that have homes on 3 and 4 acres, they still have covenant and restrictions.
That's right. Yep. Every property is different, and as Stephen has outlined, some HOA companies are very organized and run by large property management companies, and some are much smaller and less organized. So you just have to do your due diligence as the buyer and figure out how your property is governed.
And I do want to say that not all HOAs are bad. You don't want everyone running amok once you move into a neighborhood. With new neighborhoods with homes very close together, you don't want people doing additions without approvals, doing colors that may not complement the neighborhood, having 5 or 6 cars in a driveway. They're not bad things. You just need to know what they govern, because if filed correctly and organized, they're enforceable all the way down, sometimes to foreclosure.
Right, correct. And a worst case scenario in the event of not paying the HOA dues, that certainly is one of the legal ramifications that they can take.
If you're thinking about buying a home, or if you're refinancing your current home, the decision on where to close the property and what attorney to use is yours to make, not your realtors, not your lenders. So I recommend hiring someone who does it correctly. And Johannes Meyer and Sawyers, and certainly Trent over there, are absolutely amazing. We'll put the link to their law office here. Thank you so much, Trent, for being on today's show. Bring that valuable information to our homeowners so they don't make decisions that then they regret.